That's money. So for women, money is important. Just like men, money is part of your power, but for women, the game is pretty different than men. And in many ways, our financial disempowerment starts pretty early. Those seeds are planted early. And I want to introduce you to a hypothetical couple. This is Jack and Jill. They look good together. Jack and Jill are the same age. They have the same degree. They went to the same college, and they have the same first job. But Jill is earning less, and I think a lot of the women in the room know about that. So Jill, even though she's doing the same job, is earning about 18 cents less for every dollar that Jack earns. Now they're both good savers. They're saving 10% of what they make. They're both really focused on making something of their lives. They're investing their money. They're both getting about 6 to 7% on the money that they earn. But because Jill is earning less, she is saving less. And Jill, unlike Jack, will also spend 11 years outside of the paid workforce to take care of her kids and her elderly parents. She's also 30% more likely to work part-time. And what does all of this mean? In a couple of decades, when Jill turns 70, she will actually have half the retirement savings as Jack. And it's really because she's paid less, and it's the domino effect of being paid less. She's not only paid less, she's taken on this unpaid job of caring for family and being a caregiver. And we do this with love. We care for our parents with love. We care for our children with love. But this has an effect, and I'll call it the caregiver effect. This caregiver effect impacts how women look at jobs, how they decide the types of jobs they want to take, and they often take lower paying jobs because they're more flexible. And as a result, it impacts how much they get paid on those jobs. It trickles even further into a bigger world picture. It impacts how we choose our leaders, how we view leaders. It impacts how we view money. It impacts how confident we feel with money. And it impacts how confident we as women feel asserting our own power. And in a very big way, money is power. And when women don't have a confidence with money, it undermines our role in society, and it puts us in the position of being financially dependent for a lifetime. Now, a lifetime of earning less has big impacts for women that want to be entrepreneurs. And that's because less savings means less money to start a business. It also means because you're out of the workforce more than men, you're less financially savvy, you have fewer networks that you can lean on when you're ready to start raising capital, and you have a lower credit score. I wish I could bring Susie Orman up here, but your credit score matters, and it follows you in so many different aspects of your life. When you have a lower credit score, the average woman has 10-point lower FICO score than the average man. I mean, this is nationally. And when you have a lower credit score, it means you're going to pay more for a mortgage than a man is. You're going to pay more for your student loans. And now that has a compounding effect. Again, now you have less money. You were paid less. You have less savings. You're paying more for all this stuff. And now you have even less money to use towards starting your business. And that weaker network leads to fewer banking contacts. So again, when it's time to go get a loan, there's fewer people you can call and turn to. And it has, again, a very meaningful real-world impact in your ability to start a business. There's really two places where you get startup capital for starting a brand new business. It's debt and equity. And you see two boxes up there, but they may as well be one. And that one box is you. The money that you use to start a business comes from you. And that equity is likely to come from your savings or the savings of friends and family or assets that you've accumulated in your lifetime. You own a house or other stocks or bonds, things you can pull from when you're ready to take a risk. And similarly with debt, when your ability to get a loan, your ability to get credit cards, it all just goes back to you. So when we talk about, well, where do entrepreneurs actually get startup capital? 66% of startup capital comes from savings and home equity and assets. Again, you. The biggest bar up there is you. 10% of startup capital comes from credit cards. And again, that's because that's one of the most easily available forms of credit, and most of us have the opportunity to get this credit, but it's something that you have to learn how to use because the interest levels can be very high. And then finally, only 6% of startup capital comes from bank loans. And there's a difference between starting a business and expanding a business. Now, the vast majority of people who are expanding a business don't actually go out and get any kind of startup capital. But again, if you have a business that has growth potential, your ability to scale that business and expand that business goes back to your savings. And it also goes back to how you run that business. 6% of expansion capital comes from your profit. Another 10% come from credit cards and loans. So going back to men versus women, 59% of men draw from savings, whereas 51% of women draw from savings. 8.5% of men use bank loans. Only 3.6% of women use bank loans. And I think, again, this is very meaningful and goes back to our story of Jack and Jill. It's a combination of the actual savings you have to draw from and the actual access to bank loans that you even have as a woman. So what does this mean for women? Your ability to access startup capital is very much linked to your savings and your ability to access credit cards. As a woman, you're less likely to apply for loans and you're less likely to get loans, and that is linked to three things. One is your credit score, and we're going to talk about how that sausage gets made. The second is your network, and the third is risk aversion. Just in general, men and women are different in the ways that they approach risk and how much debt they're willing to take on. And this lack of outside capital stunts growth in many ways for female-owned businesses. It also limits mentorship and advice, because when you do have a banker you can talk to or an investor you can talk to, it's not just the money that they bring to the table, it's fantastic advice and guidance and experience that just we as women, when we're self-funding things, we just don't get access to. So there's a difference between being self-employed and being a small business that employs other people. And the vast majority of female-owned businesses are actually businesses that never employ anyone other than the founder. And that's really looking at entrepreneurship for self-employment. I mean, going back to the story we were talking about earlier, we have so many obligations, taking care of children, elderly parents, the juggle, that a lot of women are looking for a more flexible circumstance. And it's important to note that when you're looking at starting up, 90% of female-owned businesses are self-employed businesses. And for the vast majority of self-employed businesses, people get started for less than $10,000. Now, when it's time to scale and really grow into a company that can hire other people, the vast majority of people in that type of circumstance are starting up with about $25,000. And there, your ability to scale and grow goes back to you. It's your personal balance sheet. It's what do you have in assets, what do you have in savings, and how can you take that to a banker and have them take a risk on you. The extra money bags are for people here at the bottom. So we're going to talk about your personal finances and smart money moves that you should make before starting up. Because again, so much of your ability to start a business goes back to your personal finances. Some of it is very much common sense. So when you're thinking about starting a business, you want to think about your burn and how much you spend, and you want to reduce your personal living expenses. It's really something that if you're thinking about starting a business, ideally these are things you're thinking about 12 to 24 months in advance of taking the plunge. So you want to cut down your burn, you want to cut down what you're spending money on, and you want to have that nest egg. Ideally, you want to save 18 to 24 months of living expenses, and that may seem like a really big number to a lot of people in this room. It's because starting a business is just like renovating a house. whatever budget you get and bids you get, it's gonna cost you 2 or 3 times as much. So you need to be prepared, and you need to be able to cover your expenses while you're taking this risk and investing in yourself. Another consideration is taking on consulting projects. This is a great way for you to just pad on the amount of money that you have in savings, and it's something you can do while you're concurrently starting your business. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing affair. Anything you can do to look for supplemental income will really help you have the room to run and make your dream a reality. The next very practical step you can do is look at your credit cards, and before you take the plunge, actually increase the credit limits on your credit card. And we'll talk a little bit about why this makes sense. But for the number one reason I'm going to give you is because as soon as you become self-employed, the government's going to look at you differently, the IRS is going to look at you differently, and bankers are going to look at you differently, and so are credit card companies. So while you have a stable W-2 income, get higher credit limits. The next thing is make purchases now while you can. Again, once you have self-employment income, it actually becomes a lot harder to get a mortgage, it becomes harder to get a car loan, and these are all things that you should very methodically do before you take the plunge and become an entrepreneur. If you need to refinance, it's time to do it before. And then finally, I want to spend a little bit of time on strengthening your credit score, because this is very, very important. When you look at men and women, men have about $25,000 of outstanding debt, and women have $21,000 of outstanding debt. But women still generally have lower credit scores than men, and that's because of credit utilization. And what credit utilization is basically the difference between the credit that people are willing to extend to you and the credit that you actually use. And it's a really important statistic for most credit bureaus in assigning your FICO score. And that FICO score is super important. So the biggest thing you can do to improve your FICO score is to pay on time. Women generally are not as good about paying on time, and that's something that the credit bureaus track very carefully. So that's number one. Number two is that credit utilization score. And the way to improve your credit utilization score is actually to increase the amount of credit that you have on your credit cards and use less of it. There's an optimal number, which is 30%. You want to try to keep your credit utilization to 30% or less. And if you do that for 6 months, if you pay your bills on time, you actually will start moving the needle on your credit score. And the difference between a 704 is actually the average FICO score in America. The difference between a 700 and a 720 is getting a loan and getting a lower interest rate. Again, and all of that is more money in your pocket to start your business and make more money. Other little tips you can keep in terms of improving your credit score are don't open too many accounts at once. This is something that actually matters. Keep old accounts active. So if you've got like 10 credit cards, don't go shutting them all down because you think you're cleaning house. That will not help your credit score. So when it comes to being in it, being in the thick of running that business, it's all about taking smart steps to increase your financial runway. Your financial runway is really how long you can go taking these risks where you may not be making money like you were in your normal job. And again, this is where your savings and your access to credit becomes essential in giving you the runway to be able to make your dream a reality. So when it comes to lengthening your financial runway, you got to think about slack resources. So that basically just means, how can you take something that you do well and offer it to someone else so that you don't have to pay for something? And that's bartering to a certain extent as well. Shopping for discounts, the internet makes it very easy. Don't for just the sake of convenience, just buy anything. Take the time to shop for discounts. It can make a very big difference. Keep your team small and agile. It's very glamorous when we think about starting a business. I think often we think about VC and how it's all focused on growth and growing. But the reality is, for most small business owners, it's about pinching pennies, doing it yourself, and being very careful with your assets, because those assets are absolutely dire to your ability to continue pursuing your business. And then finally, with marketing, which ends up being a very big part of your expense, because in the beginning, you don't really have a business until you're selling something. So whatever you're spending on marketing, find out how you can track the return on that investment and be as focused on seeing a very distinct return on your marketing dollars. You might be saying, Monica, why haven't I heard anything about Shark Tank yet? Why haven't we talked about venture capital yet? So Shark Tank, Shark Tank is a TV show, and I think we all know Shark Tank is a TV show, but as far as venture capital goes, there's $130 billion that was invested into high growth businesses in 2018. Of that $130 billion, only $2.8 billion went to women-owned businesses. So the reality is that venture capital is really not something that a lot of women get access to, and it's a very distinct type of business that goes after that type of capital. The other type of outside capital is banks. And really, when you're going after bank loans, it's all about banking relationships, it's all about your assets, and that's where having a spouse with a steady job actually makes a difference, and it makes it easier for you to get a bank loan. Generally, banks are looking for 3 years of business activity, so getting a loan off the bat isn't typical unless you have some sort of asset. And their banks are also looking for a positive sales and profit trend. And the type of bank you go after also makes a difference. So the national approval rates for national banks is about 13%, and the approval rate for local and community banks is 48%. So if you get rejected at a big bank, know that the story could be very different if you go to a local bank. And then finally, crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is actually a very positive spot, just in general in terms of where people are getting access to capital. It's becoming a growing, important source of capital. And in particular, women have an edge when it comes to crowdsourcing. So two of the biggest crowdsourcing engines are Kickstarter and Kiva. And with Kickstarter, the average goal that people set is about $20,000, and with Kiva, the average goal is about $5,000. And so there is a difference in terms of even how well men and women do. Men generally are able to raise $20,000 on these types of platforms, and the average raise of a woman is $14,500. And in general, your ability to raise money using crowdsourcing platforms is very closely linked to your social network. So in general, the rule of thumb is if you're trying to raise more than $6,000, you really should be investing time building your social network, because being able to blast that on Facebook actually has a very linear impact to how well you do. So little tips to help you with crowdsourcing. A video actually increases your odds of success with crowdsourcing by 12%. So think about incorporating a video. Rewards actually also increase your likelihood of meeting your crowdsourcing goals. So that can be, if this product gets funded, then I'm sending everyone this little item. So think about that. And again, social media and building that social network. So whatever you can do to really foster that network and invest in that network, if you decide to go after crowdsourcing dollars, it can make a very big difference. And I'll just leave you with the note that I think I've pounded from the start, which is you are your own first investor in your company. And so whatever you can do to really invest in yourself, really take control of your personal finances, will reward you in multitudes when it's time to start a business. Thank you.